What happens when one of television's most respected hosts comes face to face with a guest who refuses to play by the rules? In just 37 seconds, a single comment would turn a routine interview into one of the most shocking moments in talk show history. The studio lights were bright that evening. Jon Stewart sat behind his desk, relaxed and ready for what should have been another interesting conversation. Across from him sat Meghan Markle, dressed impeccably, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. The audience had no idea they were about to witness something unprecedented. Jon started with his usual warmth. "Thanks so much for being here. I've been looking forward to this conversation." Meghan smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, I appreciate the invitation, Jon. Though I have to say, I had some concerns about coming on." The audience shifted slightly. This wasn't the typical guest response. Jon, ever the professional, leaned in with curiosity. "Concerns? About what exactly?" "About whether this would be a real conversation or just another platform for cheap jokes," Meghan said, her tone sharp. Jon's eyebrows raised slightly. He maintained his composure, keeping his voice friendly. "I promise you, this is a real conversation. I'm genuinely interested in hearing what you have to say." Meghan crossed her arms. "That's what they all say, isn't it? Before they twist everything into something clickable." The audience grew quieter. Jon nodded slowly, clearly trying to understand where this was coming from. "I hear you. Media can be tough, but I've always tried to have honest conversations here. That's the whole point of what we do." "Honest?" Meghan let out a small laugh that felt cold. "Jon, with all due respect, you've made a career out of mocking people. How is that honest?" Jon's expression remained calm, though you could see him processing this unexpected turn. Comedy and honesty aren't mutually exclusive. I've spent years holding powerful people accountable, asking tough questions. That's always been the mission. "Accountability," Meghan repeated, as if tasting the word. "Is that what you call it when you make fun of people who are struggling? When you turn someone's pain into a punchline?" The tension in the studio was building. Jon shifted in his seat, keeping his voice steady and respectful. "I've never made fun of people who are struggling. I've made fun of people in power who abuse that power. There's a difference." Meghan leaned forward, her eyes intense. "And who decides who deserves to be made fun of, Jon? You? The audience? The people who've never walked in someone else's shoes?" Jon took a breath. "That's fair. Comedy is subjective, but I've always tried to punch up, not down. To go after institutions and systems, not individuals who are vulnerable." "Tried," Meghan said, emphasizing the word. "But you don't always succeed, do you?" The audience was completely silent now. Jon maintained his professional demeanor, though his patience was clearly being tested. "No, I don't always get it right. Nobody does. But I listen, I learn, I try to do better." Meghan sat back, a slight smirk on her face. "How noble of you. Tell me, Jon, do you think that's enough? A simple, 'I'll try to do better'?" Jon's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained measured. "I think it's a start. I think owning your mistakes and committing to growth is important. What would you suggest instead?" "Maybe actually listening when people tell you you've hurt them," Meghan shot back, "instead of defending yourself and making it about your intentions." Jon nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. Intentions don't erase impact. I've said that myself many times, but I'm a little confused here. Have I personally done something to hurt you? Because if I have, I'd like to understand what that was." Meghan's expression hardened. "This isn't about me personally, Jon. This is about a pattern of men in powerful positions, thinking they can say whatever they want without consequences." The audience began to murmur. Jon raised his hands slightly, palms up. "I agree that's a real problem, and I've tried to be part of the solution, not the problem. but I'm still not clear on what specifically you're referring to. Of course you're not, Meghan said, her voice dripping with condescension. That's the privilege, isn't it? You don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about every word being scrutinized, every move being questioned. Jon's expression showed genuine confusion mixed with growing frustration. I've spent my entire career being scrutinized. Every word, every joke, every segment. That comes with the territory. I'm not claiming victimhood here, but let's be accurate about the reality. Meghan waved her hand dismissively. It's not the same, and you know it. You've never had to deal with what I've dealt with. The racism, the sexism, the constant attacks. Jon's voice remained calm but firm. You're absolutely right. I haven't experienced those things, and I wouldn't pretend to understand what that's like. But that doesn't mean I haven't faced criticism, or that my experiences are invalid. Invalid? Meghan's voice rose slightly. Did I say your experiences were invalid? Or are you just used to being the one asking the questions, and you can't handle being challenged? The audience was riv captive now, watching this exchange unfold with growing discomfort. Jon took a visible breath, clearly working to maintain his professionalism. I can handle being challenged just fine. I welcome it, actually. But I'm trying to have a constructive conversation here, and I'm not sure that's what's happening. Meghan stood up slightly from her seat, her body language becoming more aggressive. Constructive? You want constructive? How about this? Maybe you should think twice before bringing people on your show if you're not prepared to be held accountable. Jon's eyes widened slightly. Held accountable for what, specifically? I keep asking you to tell me what I've done, and you keep speaking in generalities. That's the problem right there, Meghan said, pointing at him. You think everything needs to be spelled out for you. You can't just reflect on your own behavior and figure it out. Jon's patience was visibly wearing thin, though he kept his voice controlled. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on my behavior. I've apologized when I've gotten things wrong. I've had difficult conversations. But if you're accusing me of something specific, I deserve to know what it is. Meghan laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You deserve? That's rich. What about what I deserve? What about being treated with respect? Jon's voice became more pointed, though still professional. I've been nothing but respectful to you since you sat down. I invited you here in good faith. I've listened to everything you've said. But respect goes both ways. Don't lecture me about respect, Meghan snapped. You have no idea what it's like to have your reputation destroyed, to have everything you say twisted and used against you. Jon leaned forward, his expression serious. Actually, I do know what that's like. I've been in this business for decades. I've been misquoted, taken out of context, attacked from all sides. It comes with the job. But I've never blamed an entire medium or everyone in it. Meghan's face flushed. Are you seriously comparing your experience to mine right now? Are you really that tone deaf? Jon's voice remained steady, but there was an edge to it now. I'm not comparing experiences. I'm saying that we can both acknowledge our different challenges without dismissing each other. That's how conversations work. Conversations, Meghan repeated mockingly. This isn't a conversation, Jon. This is you sitting in your comfortable chair, in your successful show, telling me how I should feel about my own experiences. Jon shook his head. That's not what I'm doing at all. I've asked you multiple times to share your perspective, and every time I do, you attack me for asking. Meghan stood up fully now. I'm not attacking you. I'm being honest. Maybe that's something you're not used to from your guests. The audience gasped slightly. Jon remained seated, his voice calm but firm. My guests are honest with me all the time, but they're also respectful. They engage in actual dialogue rather than hurling accusations. Accusations? Meghan's voice was loud now. You think this is about accusations? This is about holding people accountable. This is about not letting people hide behind their platforms. Jon stood up as well, matching her energy but keeping his composure. I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm right here, trying to have a conversation with you. But you came in here with an agenda, and nothing I say is going to change that. Meghan stepped closer to the desk. My agenda. My agenda is to speak truth to power. My agenda is to not let people like you get away with pretending you're above it all. Jon's voice was firmer now. I've never claimed to be above anything. I've admitted my flaws, my mistakes, my limitations. But you're not interested in that. You're interested in making me the villain of whatever story you've constructed in your head. There it is, Meghan said triumphantly. The defensiveness. The inability to just accept criticism without making yourself the victim. Jon's expression hardened. I'm not making myself a victim. I'm defending myself against vague, unfounded attacks. There's a difference. If you have specific grievances, state them. Otherwise, this isn't productive. Meghan picked up her microphone and started to remove it. You know what's not productive? Trying to have a real conversation with someone who doesn't want to hear it. Someone who's so caught up in their own self-righteousness that they can't see their own flaws. Jon's voice rose slightly for the first time. I can see my flaws just fine. What I can't see is what this has to do with anything. You came on this show. You've been hostile from the start, and you're accusing me of things you won't even specify. Meghan threw her hands up. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle it when someone doesn't worship at your altar, when someone dares to question the great Jon Stewart. Jon's face showed genuine frustration now. I don't want anyone worshiping at any altar. I want to have meaningful conversations, but you've made that impossible tonight. I've made it impossible? Meghan's voice was incredulous. You invited me here under false pretenses. You promised a real conversation, and instead, you've been defensive and dismissive from the moment I started being honest. Jon's voice was strong and clear. I've been neither defensive nor dismissive. I've been trying to understand what you're actually upset about, but you keep moving the goalposts. First, it's about comedy. Then, it's about power. Then, it's about respect. What is this really about? Meghan completely removed her microphone now, tossing it onto the desk. It's about the fact that people like you never have to answer for anything. You hide behind humor, behind just asking questions, behind this false humility. And when someone calls you out, you act like they're the problem. Jon remained standing, his voice calm but authoritative. I've answered for plenty in my career. I've had difficult conversations. I've been held accountable many times. But accountability requires specificity. It requires good faith, and you've shown neither tonight. Meghan grabbed her bag. I don't need to show you anything, Jon. I don't owe you explanations or specifics. I came here to speak my truth, and if you can't handle that, that's on you. Jon's expression was one of disbelief mixed with disappointment. Speaking your truth doesn't mean attacking someone without cause. It doesn't mean coming into someone's space and being hostile for no clear reason. No clear reason? Meghan's voice was shrill now. The reason is clear to anyone who's paying attention. But you're not paying attention, are you? You never do. You just sit here in your bubble, thinking you're so clever, so insightful. Jon's voice became very measured, very controlled. I think we need to take a break. This clearly isn't working, and I don't think it's beneficial for either of us to continue like this. Meghan laughed harshly. Of course, when things get uncomfortable, just cut to commercial. That's the solution, right? Don't actually deal with the problem. Just make it go away. Jon shook his head slowly. The problem is that there's no conversation happening here. You're not interested in dialogue. You're interested in monologuing and attacking. I'm interested in honesty, Meghan shot back. Something you clearly can't handle. You want everyone to play nice, to follow your rules, to make you look good. Well, I'm not here for that. Jon's voice was steady and final. Then I think you should leave. I tried to have a respectful conversation. I tried to understand your perspective. But you've made it clear that's not what you want. So, I think it's best if we end this now. Meghan's face showed shock for a moment before it twisted into anger. You're kicking me off? You're actually kicking me off your show? Jon nodded, his expression serious, but not angry. I am. This isn't productive. It's not respectful to me, to the audience, or frankly, to you. So yes, I'm asking you to leave. Meghan's voice became louder, more frantic. This is unbelievable. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle criticism, so you silence people. You're no different than any other powerful man who can't take the heat. Jon's voice remained calm. This has nothing to do with criticism. I've taken plenty of criticism over the years. This has to do with you coming here with bad intentions and refusing to engage honestly. Bad intentions? Meghan was nearly shouting now. My intentions are to hold you accountable. My intentions are to not let you off the hook. But you can't handle that, can you? Jon gestured toward the exit. I can handle accountability just fine. What I can't handle is whatever this is. So please, gather your things and go. Meghan stood there for a moment, her chest heaving, her face red. You're making a huge mistake. Everyone's going to see what kind of person you really are. Jon's voice was quiet but firm. Everyone's going to see exactly what happened here tonight, and they can make up their own minds. But right now, I need you to leave my stage. Meghan grabbed her remaining belongings, her movements sharp and angry. This isn't over, Jon. People need to know the truth about you. Jon remained standing, his posture straight, his voice unwavering. The truth is right there on camera. Everything that happened here. Tonight. No editing, no spin. Just what actually occurred. Meghan turned to the audience, her voice desperate now. You all saw this, right? You saw how he treated me? How he dismissed everything I said? The audience sat in uncomfortable silence. No one responded. Jon spoke again, his voice gentle but clear. Meghan, please, let's not make this worse than it already is. Just go. Meghan's eyes swept across the silent audience, searching for support that wasn't coming. Her expression crumbled slightly before hardening again. Fine, I'll go. But this isn't the end of this conversation. Jon nodded. Maybe not. But it's the end of this one. I wish you well. Meghan turned on her heel and started walking toward the exit. Halfway there, she stopped and turned back. You know what your problem is, Jon? You've forgotten what it's like to be challenged. You've gotten too comfortable. Too safe. Jon's response was measured. Maybe. Or maybe I just know the difference between being challenged and being attacked. And tonight was the latter. Meghan stared at him for a long moment, her face a mixture of anger and something else. Hurt, perhaps. Or frustration. Then she turned and continued walking, her footsteps echoing in the silent studio. As she reached the exit, she paused one more time. History won't be kind to people like you, Jon. People who had the power to do better, but chose comfort instead. Jon's voice carried across the studio. And history won't be kind to people who mistake aggression for courage or hostility for honesty. Safe travels, Meghan. With that, Meghan pushed through the exit doors and disappeared. The studio remained silent for several long seconds. Jon stood there, his expression unreadable, processing what had just happened. Finally, he looked at the audience. Well, he said quietly, that was unexpected. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Jon ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of genuine bewilderment. I want to be very clear about something. I invited Meghan here in good faith. I wanted to have a real conversation. I still don't fully understand what happened, but I want you all to know that I tried. The audience began to applaud, softly at first, then growing stronger. Jon raised his hand to quiet them. No, Don't applaud. This isn't something to celebrate. This was a failure of communication. Maybe mine, maybe hers, probably both. But it was a failure. Someone in the audience shouted support for Jon. He shook his head. I appreciate that, but this isn't about taking sides. This is about the fact that two adults couldn't find a way to talk to each other. And that's sad, regardless of who you think was right or wrong. Jon sat back down at his desk, his movements slower now, weighted with the heaviness of what had just transpired. He looked directly into the camera. I've spent my career trying to have difficult conversations, trying to bridge divides, trying to find common ground. Tonight, I couldn't do that, and I have to sit with that. He paused, collecting his thoughts. But I also have to be honest. I don't know what else I could have done differently. I asked questions. I listened. I tried to understand. And I was met with hostility at every turn. So maybe sometimes, despite our best efforts, communication just breaks down. Jon looked down at his desk, then back up at the audience. I'm going to take a moment here. We're going to cut to a quick break. And when we come back, we'll try to process this together. Because I think we all need a minute to breathe. The audience sat in continued silence, the weight of what they had witnessed still hanging heavy in the air. Jon's expression showed exhaustion, confusion, and a deep sadness. Not anger, not vindication, just the profound disappointment of a conversation that went completely off the rails. As the studio lights dimmed slightly, signaling the commercial break, Jon remained at his desk, his head in his hands. The crew members moved quietly, unsure of what to say or do. This wasn't scripted. This wasn't planned. This was real, raw, and unlike anything that had happened on this stage before. The audience began whispering among themselves, trying to make sense of what they had just seen. Some seemed sympathetic to Jon, others confused. A few appeared troubled by the entire exchange. But everyone understood they had witnessed something significant, something that would be talked about for a long time to come. Jon lifted his head and looked around the studio, taking in the faces of his crew, his audience, the empty chair where his guest had been sitting just minutes before. He took a deep breath and straightened his papers, preparing to continue the show despite the chaos that had just unfolded. In that moment, his professionalism shone through. Despite being attacked, despite being confused, despite every reason to be angry or defensive, Jon remained committed to doing his job, to being honest with his audience, and to maintaining the integrity that had defined his career. The lights came back up. Jon looked into the camera, his expression composed, but serious. The show would go on. But this moment, this confrontation, this complete breakdown of communication would not be forgotten. It would be replayed, analyzed, and debated. And through it all, one thing remained clear. Jon Stewart had tried to maintain dignity, respect, and professionalism in the face of unexpected hostility, while his guest had chosen a very different path.